What's up with it? What's up with it? Ladies and gents, boys and girls, welcome. Tuesday, December the 19th, 2023. Hope you are all doing well. Chris Phillips here, your host of the Daily Crow of the Spurs Up Show. I see Cameron Blassingame, Ethan K, Travi, Jacob. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Also, those in the Big Cock Club Discord, head over to the TDC Questions channel, the TDC Questions channel. To be sure your questions are answered there, guys, we have got a jam-packed show. Lots, and I mean lots to get into here on this Tuesday, guys. In the spirit of National Signing Day, tomorrow we kick off the show with our good friend JC Sherbert, who helps us break down all things Gamecocks in regards to the signing class, transfer portal, all that good stuff that's obviously happening behind the scenes. Also, guys, excuse me. Also, guys, we continue our bowl game breakdowns. We've got the Orange Bowl and the Music City Bowl today. We're double dipping with the bowl games, talking about breaking down, previewing, predicting both of those games. And, guys, later in the show, we continue with our SEC season reviews, if you will. Our good friend Colin Anthony of the Mizzodcast talking Missouri Tigers. He will join the show near the end of our show to break down all things Mizzou in 2023 and also talk about the upcoming bowl game that they've got against Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. Going to be a really, really good one. Again, guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. Really excited to chat with you all here on this Tuesday, guys. Things are rocking and rolling. The college football world continues to spin at a rapid rate just as we jumped on. LT Overton, the fantastic defensive lineman from Texas A&M. There was some rumor he may end up at South Carolina instead. He has committed to Alabama. So the Crimson Tide get a big-time pickup. Missouri also this morning getting a big-time guy on the offensive line from Oklahoma. So, again, it's day after day after day. More and more news comes out from the transfer portal, which is what we expect at this point. But again, former five-star prospect LT Overton is committing to Alabama, which again, I don't think is much of a shock for most of us that followed that closely. Either way, guys, really excited to talk ball today, breaking down these bowl games. What a bowl game we had yesterday, by the way. The famous Toastery Bowl. Incredible. Guys, you're tuned in right now, especially if you're on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell icon, so you get notifications of when we go live, when we drop new video content as well. Also, guys, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast at the Spurs Up Show. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Leave us 5 stars, by the way. Give us a 5-star review. Helps boost the show, helps new folks to find the show as well. And guys, outside of that, follow along on social media. Stay tuned to all the content on social media, content continuing to bleed out of the eyeballs. Guys, like I said, we'll have plenty of coverage tomorrow during National Signing Day, talking all things Gamecocks, SEC, everything in between. But today, a National Signing Day primer, everything you need to know to get you ready for signing day, not just from the high school ranks, but all this movement in the transfer portal as well. Our good friend JC Sherbert for the Big Spur, he took the time to talk all things South Carolina recruiting, the portal, and more. So, guys, sit back, relax, enjoy this conversation with our good friend JC Sherbert of the Big Spur. National Signing Day is officially upon us tomorrow. Nobody better to help us break down that, the madness with the transfer portal, and much more than our good friend JC Sherbert of the Big Spur joins us on a weekly basis. JC, what's going on, my man? I appreciate you taking the time during a very hectic and busy time of the year on, off the field, recruiting portal, but of course, life events happening as well, man. Thank you so much for carving out the time.
Yeah, it's no problem. I'm about 11 days from tying the knot in West Palm Beach, and so this one, we had to plan, and so I'm dealing with caterers and groomsmen's gifts and music and walking down the aisle and rings and all that good stuff. But that's okay. I don't know why. I think I'm like the NCAA. NCAA. I mean, I actually feel like a college coach now because the NCAA, wants to schedule everything in these 2 weeks. College football madness, and I think I just do that to myself sometimes. That won't be a problem. Think about what's going on that time of the year. So, but anyway, I'm managing, and you're right. It's interesting, Chris, because tomorrow is National Signing Day. There may be a guy that leaves South Carolina's class for good reason. Maybe if he, decides to do it, that would be Lee, the corner from Maryland. He had a death in the family and may just want to stay close to home, and you can't blame anybody for that, right? Um, Other than that, unless something comes up way out of left field, you're looking at a drama-free signing day as far as the high school class goes. I mean, Gatling, the receivers, who they're kind of waiting on to add him, the former Texas A&M commit from the Atlanta area. Other than that, it looks like a solid group. And I'll say this, Chris, we were talking about this yesterday. If you look at the high school class, it's gonna be about 17 guys. Okay, 8 if they get Gatling, 8 of those guys are in national all-star games, either San Antonio or Orlando, Under Armour, or I guess it's Adidas now. It used to be Army. That's a pretty stout number. I think it's a record for South Carolina. So with all the portal madness out there, I think maybe this very nice high school class is a little bit overlooked, quite frankly, because normally people be jumping up and down and shooting off fireworks and stuff with this kind of class. But the portal has just it just sucked all the oxygen out of the room for signing day. So the NCAA for years has been trying to kill signing day because they can't make any money off of it, right? And this goes back to when I worked at Rivals back in the mid 2000s. They just don't like recruiting coverage at all. And there's nothing they can do about it besides make things difficult and try to de-emphasize the day. That's why they moved. They said we'll have 2, and all that's done is create 2 monsters, right? But having the transfer portal madness out there, this has probably put a dent in, your so-called traditional recruiting coverage and your signing day spotlight, because just about all the high school kids are kind of drama-free. You had, Dylan Rivola. I can't believe flip from Mike Bobo to Marcus Satterfield. Good luck, son. You're gonna need it. And that was kind of the most dramatic thing. I mean, everything else is portal. So it's been interesting from that standpoint, Chris, as well.
JC, I'd never thought about it from the NCAA perspective. And, one of my questions I wanted to ask you was, you're somebody, again, you've covered recruiting for a long time, right? I mean, you've been in this recruiting game for quite a while now. How does it make you feel that, like you mentioned, I mean, I think it's very obvious that, the portal's a great thing. I think it's brought a new element, a new layer to collegiate athletics in regards to what we follow, content, right? The drama. I mean, it's basically free agency in college sports. But to the point you made, JC, I remember the days where National Signing Day was like Christmas for college football fans. And it was like, there was no greater thrill than following a guy's recruitment for a year or 2 years or 3 years. And then you land him on signing day and he puts that hat on or he picks your school. And like, that was such a cool moment. And now it feels like, because of the portal and NIL and not even knowing if that guy is going to finish his career at your school or even be there for longer than a year or two, to your point, it's just really put a damper on what National Signing Day is, or at least what it used to be.
Yeah, and I'll say this, here at South Carolina, I think because of the season they had, everybody's kind of on edge in the off season. So there's tremendous overreaction across the board and a lot of hyperbole out there. Oh, they're not going to stick with you anyway. But I'll say this, anybody that Shane Beamer has signed since he's been here from the high school level that they've wanted to stick around, in other words, a guy that, they didn't say, hey, look, you're probably not going to play, or maybe you want to get in the portal, because those conversations happen at every school. We know it. Not all transfer portal defections are created equally. There's not been a single guy from high school that they've signed, this staff has signed, that's left from the high school ranks. That's not, the portal, like Mario and Juice obviously came from the portal and then left or whatever. So that's a good sign. But like you look at Georgia and their defections and how many 5-star guys are in that. And look, I'm not saying those guys are probably not 5-star players. They're probably just misranked, which happens often. But you look at it, and so as a fan, you're a Georgia fan, and you're sitting there going, well, why was I ever excited about this guy? I mean, or 5 of these guys, so from that standpoint too, I think with the quote unquote bigger schools or brand name schools, because they're all big schools, but that's probably taking more of an impact in the luster off signing day than maybe some place like here where this year the class is pretty good. Beamer's done a pretty good job of keeping the good high school talent that he's signed around and stuff like that. There's other issues around here, but like I said, I look at Georgia's defections and I'm like 5-star, 5-star, 5-star. So either these guys weren't 5 stars, or being a 5-star doesn't really mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. So that's to me, that was very interesting to look at that situation at the mighty Bulldogs. The most stable, consistently good program in the country the past 3 years.
So, JC, I want to break down this recruiting class and the prospects and your thoughts on it. Before we do, though, let's just touch on the transfer portal really quickly because, like you mentioned, that's such a massive part of this thing. And I also want to save the National Signing Day stuff for a little bit later. We can really dive into it. South Carolina right now in the 24/7 Sports rankings, I believe, ranks 6th in the transfer portal rankings. 9 commitments right now. I'll just run through these. Running back Oscar Attaway III from North Texas. Of course, Rocket Sanders from Arkansas, the running back. Edge Kyle Kennard from Georgia Tech. Tight end Brady Hunt from Ball State. Wide receiver Jared Brown from Coastal Carolina. Right now, wide receiver Jaden McGowan from Vanderbilt listed. I say right now. We'll talk about that in a second. Running back Jawarn Howell from SC State. Defensive back Gerald Kilgore from East Tennessee State. And finally, defensive lineman DeAndre Jules from Pitt. If you want to talk about the latest with A.J. Swan, the Jaden McGowan situation, but really I just want to get your take, JC, because we didn't get to talk last week. How do you evaluate this transfer portal haul as a whole? And I'm sure you would agree that South Carolina's not done at this point, but based off what they've done so far, your thoughts on the difference makers they have added moving forward, because you and I both knew, and everybody else knew as well, that this was going to be a pivotal portal cycle for Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks.
Yeah, well, the running back situation was critical. Mike Morgan and I were talking the other day on the air and he brought up the point, because he covers the SEC. He was like, look, this cannot happen again to Shane Beamer, that the running back. Every school in the league has a pretty good situation at running back. It's a premier spot in this league. You got to have guys there. And they went and got guys. I mean, these three guys, Rocket Sanders, had an injury-plagued situation last year. He needs to get healthy and be back to 2022 form. But if he can even get close to that, he's a weapon. And I don't think they're going to have him carry, like the carry load for him will not be as high maybe as it would have been at Arkansas, because Oscar Attaway is really good as well. He's a 5th-year guy, older dude. We talked to his coaches at North Little Rock High School. They said he's the hardest worker that they've ever seen, just a blue-collar guy, but he's fast and big and physical. You watch him on tape. He split time with a scat back kind of guy at North Texas, and that's just kind of how their offense goes. You watch some of his runs, and he's really good. And then Jawarn Howell may be better than anybody. I mean, I hate to invoke the name Derek Squeaky Watson, but if you watch his film from SC State, it's exactly who he looks like, right down to being number 22. Maybe not quite as big as Derek. Maybe in a foot race, Derek would have beat him, because Derek had elite speed and breakaway speed, but he's that kind of back. One cut, shoulder pads facing up the field, and he's gone. Elusive, that kind of guy, spin move, all that good stuff. So I think they got a steal in Howell. I can't say enough good about him. And the good thing about him, Chris, he's got 3 more years. So it's just like, so in other words, if you look at the big puzzle of the roster, he replaced Lavoisier Carroll
Hmm.
for all intents and purposes. Lavoisier gave up football, whatever. So this guy kind of slid into that spot. And so I like that. Brady Hunt's probably an underrated pickup. He was a freshman All-American at Ball State, 6'6", 250. He's one of those big Midwestern kids, man, from Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, that you never hear about, and then all of a sudden they're playing in the NFL. I'll even throw Ohio in there for my boy Travis Kelce. Shout out. I don't envy your life. But anyway, he's that kind of guy. And they needed that because you do have Josh Simon and Michael Smith, who are kind of like Trey Knox and Josh Simon last year. I think the younger guys, McKeska, Cook, maybe even Nick Elkson, is that they probably aren't as far along developmental wise after a year as maybe you'd hope. But they can still get there. I'm not knocking those guys, but you needed a sure thing there because I think one of the most underrated parts of this past year was they missed a guy like Nate Atkins that could do the blocking on a high level, and then also factor in the passing game. Kyle Kennard's a player. I'll tell you right now, the staff had him number one as an edge target over a lot of bigger name guys. They thought he was active. He makes plays. Coming over from Georgia Tech. And then, of course, my favorite guy, DeAndre Jules. You just don't get into the lineup and play for. And I know Pitt was bad. I'm not trying to sit there and praise the mighty Panthers this year, but you don't get on the field and play for Pat Narduzzi unless you're working hard individually. And individually, he had a really good year. Gamecocks beat Florida for him. I think that's important to win battles against those guys. And he's going to come in, compete with Boogie, Tonka, TJ Sanders, and you can kind of see a nice little rotation right there starting to form along with like Nick Barrett. And then if Jerome Simmons comes in over the summer and can contribute, you could be 6 deep at defensive tackle potentially.
JC, where do you see South Carolina going from here in the portal? I know we thought receiver, wide receiver.
I'm sorry about that.
Go ahead. Yeah, I mean, hey, listen.
I didn't mean to step on you there.
No, that's what stands out. And then since we're talking receiver, what's the deal with the McGowan thing? I know there's a lot of confusion over the last 24 hours or so. I don't know that I've ever seen a kid flip in the portal per se. I don't know that I've ever seen that, but what's the latest? And you mentioned wide receiver is the number one. Do you have some names of guys out there, or you just know that's a position they are targeting?
There's some guys, and I have very few names, and I don't want to repeat them because if they don't get in the portal, then it's a bad look, on the kid at his current school and stuff. But there are some guys out there that, we sort of hope they get in the portal or whatever. And then there should be a lot of receivers to kind of pick from after bowl season and maybe even over into the spring. It's not ideal to go past the spring, I think, for South Carolina because they just need guys. Jared Brown, fine player. If McGowan sticks, fine player, but you need more guys. I mean, people are kind of obsessed with this wide receiver one thing. I think that's a fantasy football term. If we were playing fantasy football, obviously you need a guy like that. But, the wide receiver one, if you get enough good players, will step up and the cream will rise to the top. Obviously, it always does and seems to do with this program. It's a shame, really, that you don't have that Xavier Legette waiting in the wings like you did this past year, or those years where you had Debo and then he left. So it was Brian Edwards. Well, then he left, and then Shy Smith. This is a position that needs work, obviously, but that's the plan moving forward, is to kind of see who else gets out there. As far as McGowan goes, last night, talking to one contact, I would have said, yeah, he's probably going to flip. But then talking to somebody else close to his situation, probably not. So I don't know. He's a guy that I think's got potential. I think he's a good kick returner already. But he had 12 catches against SEC teams this past year. So, he's got work to do to become a bigger contributor at that level as well. And if he wants that opportunity in the SEC at South Carolina, he can take it. If you want to go to Chestnut Hill, rock and roll, man, rock and roll. So that's kind of the situation there.
JC, what do you say to the people? I'm sure you get the question a lot. It seems like every time South Carolina has gotten a commitment in the transfer portal, the response or the rebuttal is, okay, but where are the offensive linemen? What do you say to those people? Do you think South Carolina is
Yeah.
fully invested on the guys they're bringing in and recruiting and getting healthy and the guys currently in the room? Do you expect them to be active and add maybe 2 or 3 or 1 or 2, Power 5 or contributors that can come in and fight for playing time? I mean, where does South Carolina stand there? Because I think that's it's fun to get the running backs and the skill position guys, but that's what people remember most, obviously, from the 2023 season is the struggles up front.
I get that totally, but you have to get into the why. Why did they struggle up front? Well, it's because their frontline guys were hurt and injured and out. I mean, you lose your. I mean, the 2 starting tackles should have been the whole year, Casey Henry and Jalen Nichols, and Nichols was out before it even started, and then Henry was out after one play. So that was interesting. And then so you got to kind of plug and play a tackle. Big Tree gets in there's a true freshman. Trevon Ball's a true freshman. Marquis Anderson would have played had he not, but lo and behold, he's hurt. You had to move Rashawn Lee out to tackle. Nick Gargiulo's in there. And I thought Nick battled his butt off this year and played well enough. The others did not. So when you look at that, it was a mixture of injuries and youth. And so what you're looking at next year, if people want to say, well, why aren't they adding anybody? First and foremost, like the kid from Texas Tech, that his name reminds me of like a subdivision in Simpsonville, Madison Mills or something like that. It's like, you're about at Simpsonville. It's like, oh, here's Madison Mills, a very nice place to live. They take him. I mean, they take a proven tackle, because you just don't turn down proven tackles. But what you're looking at is, okay, so who's going to, all right, so how are they going to be well, Jalen Nichols is coming back for, I think, year number 7. That's a grown man. And Jalen at the end of 2022 was playing left tackle at a high level. If you remember, he's back. Rashawn Lee is back. Big Tree is back. Trevon Ball is back, and Marquis Anderson's back. Casey Henry's injury is one of those things that he keeps trying to rush. He needs to just chill. Like, he needs to sit in the easy boy recliner and have his girlfriend bring him drinks and food and get up to go to the bathroom, and that's it for about 6 weeks. He just and I respect his competitiveness, I do, but he rushed himself back, and it just got worse and worse. But my understanding is that injury it's just time. You just need time, and so that's the situation. Is everybody's going to get healthy. Plus, you have these young guys that in the 2023 class that played a lot, and that jump from freshman to sophomore year on the offensive line is usually significant if you play. If you don't, it usually takes about 3 years if you're a red shirt. But that second year through the grind, so to speak, usually is pretty good. And there's a reason Ball was a freshman All-American and Babalade was freshman of the week. And they love Anderson probably more than those other two. So, and then you've got Cam Pringle and Josiah Thompson, 2 4 and 5 star guys coming in. And then Blake Franks is a massive human being that could potentially play. So, like I can tell everybody, the situation there, it wasn't like running back where you walk in the room and it's like, hello, anybody? Where's Juju? He's getting rehab. He's the only one left. There were players in that room. There's a mixture of youth and injuries. It was the worst injury situation, Chris, on the offensive line of South Carolina since 1999. And if you remember, the 2000 offensive line led by Cedric Williams and those guys ended up being pretty salty because they were older, they were healthy, and they went out and played some ball. And Lou Holtz won 8 games after winning 0 the year before. So that's the situation there. It's the answers to that are on campus already. Unless, like I said, they get some guy that you just can't turn down because he's got experience playing tackle.
Finally, JC, before we get into National Signing Day, and again, I think this conversation is a little bit of a microcosm of how the transfer portal has taken over in regards to signing day or the portal or what have you, because there's just so much to discuss. But A.J. Swan has committed to LSU. K.J. Jefferson, it looks like his top three is rumored to be, I think, Miami, TCU, and maybe Auburn is the third. South Carolina not in the mix is the bottom line there. Malik Murphy visited campus, the Texas transfer. Where do they stand with him, JC? And if they don't get him, where do they stand on getting a quarterback or two? Because, again, nobody, I think, is saying South Carolina should go out and find a guy to take Lenoris Sellers' job, if you will, or take over his QB1, but adding competitive depth to the room is something that we have talked about. Where do they stand at the quarterback position?
It's huge. Yeah, Chris, you're right. We're gonna look and find out Dowell Loggins' ability to spot talent. All those years in the NFL, man, he'll be able to find somebody. I keep thinking back. The backup for the Bears is this guy named Tyler. I don't remember his last Begnet, something like that. Undrafted free agent rookie from Shepherdsburg College in West Virginia. They need to find their Tyler Begnet. They can go in there and make something happen. With Malik Murphy, and I've got a different viewpoint than a lot of people with KJ Jefferson. I just, people are like, well, KJ's similar to Lenoris. Well, yes and no. I mean, KJ struggles throwing the ball. I respect the hell out of him. He's one of my favorite players because he's so competitive and physical and tough. But the bottom line is, in this league, you got to be able to throw it. I don't know that in this offense or whatever, I just don't know that he's a fit. And I don't know that he would beat out Lenoris. Now, Malik, that's a different story to me. It's like, yeah, well, he does some different types of things. He's a different kind of guy, electric almost, which I think Lenoris Sellers will end up being. But Malik's kind of a different animal. I did hear Duke is probably where he's going to go. I did hear Duke's got a sizable Manny Diaz. I guess they handed him some NIL money up there. And so, and that's kind of I would have thought Malik Murphy, after what he did at Texas this year, would have had a lot of big options, but no, I guess. But so we'll see what the deal is with that. But I think it's going to be. I think the AJ Swan situation was very unfortunate because I've said from the start. I even said it on the show. I think before they even contacted AJ Swan that's the type of guy. Swan or Seals, one of those guys from Vandy that started that was just looking for a fresh start that can come in and get you through. If there's an injury, and I think the LSU situation, I think AJ feels like, and his mom feel like that they're probably a little more similar to Garrett Nussmeier quarterback wise than they are to Sellers here. And plus it's LSU. So, I think that was the draw there, but he was the welcome home that we were missing out there. I think that's been reported. So nobody's gonna get mad at me about that. So, if McGowan flips, there's technically going to be two flips, I guess. I guess it's not really a flip if it's not public, but that's only the second welcome home or third where the guy's not ended up coming or committing in public. So Beamer's got a pretty good track record there, but so that's the deal with that. So I think that was the AJ Swan thing. I think kind of threw the quarterback situation a little bit chaos, but there's guys out there. I mean, there's some kids in the MAC that are possibilities and stuff like that. But I think right now though, if you're a fan, you got to put your faith in Dowell Loggins' ability to evaluate, because that's it's going to be it's not going to be somebody where you go, man, great, I'm fired up that he's here. It's going to be kind of an unknown, and that's hopefully better than the I guess the reaction when he signs. How about that?
JC, to National Signing Day 2024. Of course, tomorrow is the day that pen hits paper for many of the top prospects in college football. Gamecocks right now sitting ranked 18th overall, 9th in the SEC. Of course, the class, JC, is headlined by Dylan Stewart, the 5-star edge out of the DMV, 6'5", 235. Of course, it's one of the best offensive line classes South Carolina's ever hauled in as well, with Josiah Thompson, Cam Pringle, Blake Franks. As you mentioned, some nice defensive pieces and guys like Wendell Gregory leading the way. Maz Bennett at the wide receiver position gives you a playmaker. Let me ask you this, JC, because again, the obvious headliner here is Dylan Stewart and the big offensive lineman. Who's a guy in this class that you think maybe is a little bit under the radar, not being talked about a lot, that you could see coming in and making a big impact early on?
It's hard for me to like say this because he's a top 60 player, but I mentioned Michael Smith, the tight end earlier from Savannah, who committed way early. I think he was way early. This kid's got a little bit of freak in him, and if you're short at receiver next year, you probably are going to not do what you did this year. You're probably going more two tight ends with Sellers and a run game and a respectable run game and all that. So there's going to be an opportunity for, I think, him to get on the field. I think Josh Simon's poised to have a really big year next year. So maybe, Michael's not going to be talked about a lot in the preseason, but he's got enough freakiness to where if you're looking for a guy that you're like, man, I forgot he was even committed, it would be Michael Smith. There's a reason Auburn and Tennessee made huge runs at that guy. And while the Gamecocks were losing games, they tried to kind of get that guy in. He's a playmaker and a special talent and a really good high character guy. So out of Savannah Christian. So I think that, and Savannah is a place Carolina should recruit well. It's closer to Columbia than it is to Athens. So, and he's got a teammate that's I think the number 2 player in the country for 2025. So hopefully, that pipeline continues. But Michael Smith would be my pick, kind of right off the top of my head.
And then, JC, you look at the class, again, I think Dylan Stewart would be the easy answer, but who's the guy you see making the most immediate impact for South Carolina? Maybe next year could be a contributor and a guy who makes a difference.
Can I have two answers on this?
Yeah,
for sure. Co-leaders. Dylan Stewart, he's too good not to play. Some defensive ends, Chris, that are ranked highly, they need a year. Jadeveon Clowney wasn't really one of them. Much was made out of him not starting, but his second game against Georgia, he took Aaron Murray and him and anyway, that dude was a freak. But a lot of DNs don't. They get to school and they need a year. Maybe they get to get stronger and stuff. Dylan Stewart, when you watch him play, whether he's standing up, whether he's got his hand in the ground, his floor is like amazingly high, right? In fact, the evaluators at 24/7, the reason he's not in the top 5 is they think he's almost there, kind of like Nolan Smith at Georgia would be a comparison. I think he's bigger than Nolan, but Nolan was that guy that was just ready to roll. So he's going to play. And then Jalua Solomon, I think at corner, will he be the starter? I don't know. I kind of think I'm leaning more towards like Vakari Swain or Judge Collier along with O.D. Fortune. But he's going to get into the top mix. He was the number 1 corner on their board. They covet that guy. They think he's just an amazing player. So people ask me all the time, who could be the next Gilmore, J.C. Horn, or whoever that starts, Captain Munnerlin that starts as a true freshman from the beginning at that spot. Well, next up at bats, Jalua Solomon, I think. So those 2 guys would be who I would circle right now. And obviously, like your receiver, like Mazio Bennett's probably getting in the rotation, and Gatling, if he signs with Carolina, the former A&M commits, sort of that other high floor type of guy. But if I'm going to stick with the top 2 there as far as immediate impact on defense there, Stewart and Solomon.
JC, final thing before we get you out of here on the recruiting side of things. Again, we get so lost, I feel like, naturally in the stars and the rankings. Here's what you're ranked nationally. Here's what you're ranked in the SEC. And certainly those things are important. It's kind of funny, though, with the SEC, you can be ranked 17th nationally, but be 12th in the SEC in recruiting because the league is so competitive. But what recruiting, JC, really comes down to, it's not about stars. It's about addressing positions of need, areas of need, getting your numbers right, boosting the rooms you need to boost, increasing competitive depth. That's how you win, right? Again, you could add 25-star quarterbacks in a cycle and have the number 1 rated class, and you wouldn't have accomplished anything, right? You and I would both agree. So when you look at this class for South Carolina, again, probably not going to be a lot of drama tomorrow. There'll probably be some more additions in the portal, but I'd imagine that a lot of the heavy lifting is done to this point. When you're talking National Signing Day, when you're talking transfer portal, all the above, how do you feel South Carolina? How do you feel Shane Beamer, the job he's done in regards to addressing the needs of the football team and best setting them up for success moving into 2024?
Yeah, I think it's a very good job. I mean, you've got probably pound for pound one of the best high school classes in program history. Let's just be honest. I mean, they've never had 8 guys in Under Armour and Army, and that's a good beyond stars. That's a good point of view because those are professional people that take a look at the players and pick them for those games. They've never had that. I think the most they've ever had is 4, across both games. So that's big. Having 2 5-star linemen is big. Having a 5-star from out of state's big for this program. And then with the portal, I think they've attacked it aggressively. They've gotten some needs filled, and then a lot of guys that make you feel better about next season. Quite frankly, where I think they're maybe a little short, I'd like to see them with another edge or two. What I would like to see maybe another high school edge. The Cameron Fountain situation stung a bit because that gives you some bookends with he and Stewart. If they can find another edge in the portal, certainly I think he would be welcome. A defensive tackle high school recruiting needs to step up, obviously, and that's not anybody's fault. Travian Robertson, where most kids are deciding in the summer now, man, he got here like May. No time to build relationships. And then Georgia offered every single D tackle on the board and got them all. How about that? And so D tackle recruiting is an area they need to, from the high school ranks starting in 2025, you got to get it going. And then, I think receiver as well. I think Gatling and Bennett are good to go, but, you're getting awfully young there. You got to hope Kelton Henderson, Elijah Caldwell, Tyshawn Russell, and Nick Harbor take a big step this offseason because it is a mystery. So receivers, maybe as well. I know they flipped the position in the portal, but, I would have liked to have seen them landed another high school running back, frankly. They struck out on everybody but Fuller. So that's not a big criticism, but that's just something where you kind of feel kind of breaking it down as far as filling needs. There's always more than one way to get things done, and that's fine. They filled the need. That's the bottom line. But, you sit there, you're going 1 for 4 with your running backs when the need is obvious. That's what's maybe a new sales pitch you can come up with if those are the results there. So that's kind of my, long and short of it with this class. I think, overall people should be thrilled. I think, like I said, people probably aren't because the portal is sucking. It's like maybe the black hole, that old Disney movie. It's like the black hole, dude. It's like, God almighty, portal. I got this AI program that could do little cartoons. I may type in black hole football recruiting and see what it comes up with.
It is indeed affecting it that way, JC. But still, for those of us who have followed college football for forever, college football recruiting, there still is some joy in it. Kind of an early Christmas for college football.
Yeah.
That being said, JC, I appreciate you taking the time, my man. Thank you so much. Hey, Merry Christmas to you and yours. Happy New Year. And we'll talk to you in 2024.
Thanks. I want to say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you, Chris. It's been a blessing being on the show. And to all the fans of the Spurs Up show out there, Merry Christmas to you guys too.
Okay, guys, that was JC Sherbert of the Big Spur. Appreciate him taking the time. Some really, really good insight there on the recruiting side of things, transfer portal side of things, what have you. And again, we always appreciate our good friend JC Sherbert. That is the last time we will speak to JC in the 2023 calendar year. And I told him off the air, but I want to say it publicly on the air here as well. Truly grateful for JC taking his time to chat with us all year long, all the value that he inserted on the show on a weekly basis, and the friendship and the relationship that I've built with a guy like JC Sherbert. It's something that's invaluable, and I can't say thank you enough for JC. Again, I know you guys have enjoyed it greatly. Many of you have reached out to me and told me that JC Sherbert is your favorite guest that we have on a weekly basis. So again, love to hear that, guys. I appreciate that feedback, certainly. And again, definitely want to share my gratitude and say thank you to JC Sherbert for taking the time throughout the 2023 calendar year. Guys, that being said, we're going to jump into our first break of the day. On the other side, We'll keep the conversation rolling. We're talking bowl games. Music City Bowl first, as Auburn will take on the Maryland Terrapins. I'll break down that game, preview that game, predict that game, and more on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie, ho. Muscle Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Tuesday, December the 19th, 2023. I want to say thank you so much to each and every single one of you for tuning in, guys. I want to say thank you yet again to JC Sherbert and Electric Conversation. As always, as again, we get prepared for tomorrow, National Signing Day. Many of the top prospects in college football will put pen to paper. And although the transfer portal admittedly has taken away some of the excitement from National Signing Day, which we may talk about this more tomorrow, because I do actually have some strong feelings on what the portal and NIL, what it's done to signing day, because I recall what it used to be like, right? And the thrill of getting a commitment or a signing, and it's different. It's changed undoubtedly. So we'll talk about that more tomorrow, though. But again, really good stuff from JC breaking everything down, guys. With that being said, we're keeping the conversation rolling. Again, we will get into your questions at some point in the show, guys. So continue to leave those at 843-790-3377. You can also interact in the comments on YouTube or Facebook. And again, guys, we will get into all of your questions. But again, guys, bowl season begins next week, and we keep it moving. We go to Nashville, Tennessee, the Music City Bowl between the Auburn Tigers and the Maryland Terrapins. Hugh Freeze's program on the Plains takes on Mike Locksley and Maryland at Nissan Stadium in Nashville, Tennessee, December the 30th, a 2 p.m. Eastern kickoff time on ABC. Guys, Auburn is a 2.5-point favorite in this ball game. The over-under is set at 49.5. It feels like so many of these bowl games have very, very similar spreads, right? A lot of them are 2.5, 3.5. The over-unders are around 46 to 49 points. Like it's kind of weird how similar they are. But either way, Tigers are a 2.5-point favorite with that over-under just under 50. And guys, as we look at this game and the top storylines, I mentioned it, but a chance to end year one of the Hugh Freeze era on a high note, right? There were ups, there were downs, there were in-betweens for Auburn in this 2023 season. And guys, I go all the way back to SEC Media Days when I heard Hugh Freeze talk about this season, and admittedly, Auburn was a stock down team for me leaving SEC Media Days, because I think anytime a coach is standing at the podium and pleading with his fan base, please be patient with us, please give us time, what he is effectively telling you is, hey, we've got holes on this roster. We've got deficiencies. We're going to do our very best to shore up, but you got to bear with us because it's going to take some time, right? So I thought you saw that this year, right? I thought you saw the good. You saw the flashes from Auburn and what they can be. And I think we're all really excited once Auburn gets their quarterback, right? Once Hugh Freeze gets his guy under center and the offense gets going, that they'll be able to click at a high level and be a real contender in the SEC. I thought you saw moments of that this year. Then you saw the bad, right? You saw the New Mexico State game. You saw the heartbreak against Alabama, which if you spin that, obviously that was a positive, but tough to spin a loss like that. So there was good, there was bad, there was ugly. But again, guys, for an Auburn program in year one of Hugh Freeze, you beat up on Maryland. You finish out this season with a win. I think you're able to take a lot of momentum into the 2024 season. You're able to take momentum onto the recruiting trail, momentum in the transfer portal, and it'll do wonders for your program if you're the folks on the Plains for sure. Guys, I mentioned that Alabama game. In this game, my biggest question, or one of my biggest questions is, has Auburn recovered from that heartbreaker against Alabama? I remember watching that game, guys, and thinking to myself, the way that Auburn's heart was just ripped out of their chest. Like, that's one of those things you don't get over in a day or two, right? That's something that can linger with you. And I think it can be a beneficial thing for Auburn, believe it or not, guys. If Hugh Freeze and his staff, they look around, they use it as a teaching moment. They use it as a teaching lesson, if you will, to where they implement things and they all learn from that mistake or the mistakes that led to that loss. Then I think you can use it to your benefit, no doubt. But that's much easier said than done, right? That's much easier said than done. When you lose a game like that, where it is so demoralizing and so backbreaking, and I wonder what the mood of the fan base is. Like, how fired up are they for the bowl game? How fired up are they for football right now after that loss to the Alabama Crimson Tide and the way you lost that football game? So the big question, guys, Can Auburn get themselves up off the mat enough to bring their best effort and take down Maryland? Because that Alabama loss was one that, we can sit here and say, well, just get over it and go play. Much, much easier said than done. Can Auburn respond the right way? Can they take out their frustrations on Maryland? That's going to be interesting to see. Guys, the latest news, this just happened about 30 minutes ago. Maryland's starting quarterback, I'm going to butcher his name, Talia Tungvalola, the brother of Tua, has officially opted out of this football game. That name is a disaster, by the way. There is no saying that. Anyways, Maryland's QB1 is out of the game. Who do they turn to in this game? Obviously, they'll have a backup going, but I mean, Talia was a fantastic player for them. You look at the numbers, 3,377 yards, 66% completion percentage. He had 25 touchdown passes as well on the season. Where does Maryland go? Again, a lot of teams, guys, are going to be facing something similar to this with the opt-outs taking place, and quarterback is certainly a position. We're seeing a lot of opt-outs in the transfer portal. Very, very active for that position, if you will. But again, he has opted out. Where does Maryland go? Good place to start for them. And I think another big storyline in this one, how does Auburn contain Maryland running back Roman Hemby, right? Hemby was a really good player for them, an impact player in that offense. 135 carries, 663 yards, 55 yards per game. He had 4 touchdowns on the year at the running back position. Also caught 37 passes for 288 yards and 3 touchdowns. Auburn, on the other hand, guys, 83rd nationally in rushing defense. So we expect Maryland, right? They were going to be balanced either way running the football. Now they're really going to have an emphasis on running the football with Roman Hemby, with a backup quarterback. Auburn, will they be able to get penetration, slow down that Maryland rushing attack, and force the Terps to throw the football? Guys, on the other side, it's all about me for the Auburn offense. It's all about keeping drives alive, staying on the field. Obviously, you need Jarquez Hunter to run the football well. You need Peyton Thorne to be good. Obviously, Robbie Ashford has entered the transfer portal, opted out of this game effectively, so you don't have him as sort of that Swiss Army knife red zone threat, if you will. But can Auburn keep drives alive and stay on the field, guys? They are 21st worst in third down conversions this season as an offense, 33.6%. They are converting. Meanwhile, Maryland defensively is 28th in the country in third down defense. They allow just 34.6%. So, can Auburn overcome that? Can they do something that they have not done at a high level all year? That is convert on third down, keep that offense on the field, put some drives together, sustain some drives, and get something out of their offense. Because again, guys, there were some glimmers of hope offensively, but not very often, right? The Auburn offense was abysmal, to say the least. One of the worst passing attacks in college football. They got to get more out of Peyton Thorne, that passing attack. And of course, guys, it's a no-brainer to say they've got to run the football effectively with Jarquez Hunter. Guys, that brings me into my prediction for this game. I don't think this is one that many folks have at the top of their radar, or I think if you rank the SEC bowl games in regards to most entertaining to least entertaining, this one's probably near the bottom, but I think it's a fascinating game nonetheless. Again, guys, December the 30th, 2 o'clock kick on ABC in Nashville, the Music City Bowl with Auburn and Maryland. I look at this game, guys. Now we know the starting quarterback for Maryland is out. It's 2 potent running games that will go against each other. Auburn has been really, really good defensively this year. They are salty on defense. And while I do think that loss to Alabama was one, I'm really curious. How does Auburn get themselves off the mat? Obviously, something that's beneficial. This game isn't like the following weekend from the Alabama game, so they've had time to process things, to get over it, to hit the practice field and figure some things out or what have you. But still, it's a tough thing to overcome. So I think this is going to be a lower scoring type of game. I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of offensive fireworks in this one. But I do think Auburn is going to have just a little bit more. I think they're going to have just enough to edge out the Maryland Terrapins, take down Maryland again. Without their starting quarterback, I think it's going to be really tough for them to move the football in this game. And I think Auburn will rely on Jarquez Hunter. I think they'll rely on a salty defense. The good news for Auburn is this, guys, running game and defense travels. And it don't matter where you go, it travels. I think it'll travel to Nashville, Tennessee. For that reason, I am picking the Auburn Tigers. Guys, lock me in. I've got Auburn 27, Maryland 20. So give me Tigers 27, Terps 20. I think it'll be a nice boost for Hugh Freeze and company, a nice exclamation point on year one of his tenure. Because, guys, getting to a bowl game, I said it over the summer, I stuck by it. Getting to a bowl game was a success for Hugh Freeze and company. When you looked at what he inherited and the roster, getting to a bowl game, if you can win this football game, go 7-6 with a bowl win, I think that will be a success in year one. And I think that will set up Auburn for a really, really big year two in 2024 under Hugh Freeze. So again, guys, the Auburn Tigers, I think, take down Maryland. Final score, 27-20. Guys, we're going to jump into another quick break. On the other side, we'll keep the convo rolling, talking bowl games. The Orange Bowl, Georgia and Florida State. We'll dive into that one, guys, on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie, ho. Muscle Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Tuesday, December the 19th, 2023. I want to say thank you all so much for your continued love and support, and I appreciate you all tuning in. Also, guys, some exciting news on the, I would say, content side of things, the live show side of things. You may have seen some other shows going live, but Instagram is now supporting live shows. So, for example, we could stream this show on our Instagram live story, what have you, on Instagram live. So we may start doing that. We may start including Instagram live in places that the show does indeed go live. So again, just stay tuned for that. But I thought a really cool thing. I think there's probably a lot of folks on Instagram that maybe don't know we go live or don't know that that we have a live show or whatever it might be, or don't know how to get to us, which I don't know how that would be the case, but you never know. That could happen. So either way, guys, just stay tuned for that. Really, really good stuff. It's exciting stuff on the content side of things. And you never know. You might see us going live on Instagram sooner rather than later. Guys, that being said, we're going to keep the conversation rolling. We do have our good friends over at the Mizzodcast coming on the show later to talk all things Missouri Tigers football. That convo happening at 1:30. So in the meantime, guys, we keep the conversation rolling. The Orange Bowl, the Georgia Bulldogs taking on the Florida State Seminoles, December the 30th, 4 p.m. Eastern time kickoff on ESPN. Guys, this game being played at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens, Florida. The spread on this one, the Dogs are a 14-point favorite. The over-under set at 44.5. And guys, my top storyline in this one, this is the we got left out of the college football playoff bowl. You know, what's kind of unfortunate about this game, guys, you put this game about 2 months ago, right, when Jordan Travis was still healthy and, we're in the midst of the season. Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey were healthy. You put this game about a month or two ago. This is a primetime premier type of matchup. Now, guys, I'll even say this. You put this game this time next year when we've got a 12-team college football playoff, this game is still set to be one for the ages. But because of some other factors, the injury to Jordan Travis, Florida State's interest level or that lack thereof in the game, which we'll get into in a second, this game all of a sudden loses some of that luster that it once had. Again, that is evidenced by Georgia being a 2-touchdown favorite in this football game. Guys, in case you missed the big news, Carson Beck, QB1 for Georgia, he is playing in the bowl game, and he is officially back for the 2024 season, which obviously, guys, is massive news for Georgia. Georgia is going to be a team that is looking to make a run yet again to the national championship. I think they're going to be a shoe-in for the 12-team playoff, obviously. And certainly, Georgia is a team with Carson Beck under center. When you look at their schedule, you look at the challenges it presents, having to try to navigate that with a brand new quarterback would have been a real struggle. The news that Georgia got that Carson Beck, and guys, Carson Beck was one of the most, I think, underappreciated players in college football this season. And I love him for next year to be a dark horse to win the Heisman Trophy because all this dude did was put up numbers. I'm not saying, obviously, that he should have won it this year or that he should have even got invited to New York. But when you look at what Carson Beck did, he simply did not get talked about enough because I think everything he did, much like everything Georgia did, was so ho-hum because the expectations were so insanely high. I challenge you to go look at the numbers for Beck. I challenge you to go look at the numbers for the Georgia passing offense, what Carson Beck and Mike Bobo did. It was wildly, wildly impressive. And so for them to get him back, to get QB1 returning in 2024 certainly sparks or should lead to another college football playoff appearance for the Dogs. And certainly they will be one of the favorites, as they should be, to win it all next year. But, of course, you've got Carson Beck playing in this game. The question for Georgia, will Brock Bowers play in this game, right? Has not made it clear on his future. the NFL draft. Most folks obviously expect he will go into the NFL draft. I'm sure there's things happening behind the scenes with NIL. Again, will Brock Bowers play in the game? He has not made it clear, guys. He's a guy that dealt with injuries all season long, was banged up. I don't think anybody would blame him. I don't think anybody would blame him in regards to if he played or did not, or, if he sat this one out because he's dealt with so much. And I think Brock Bowers, you saw him really push his body to the limits all throughout the season, playing banged up, playing hurt, came back from injury super quickly, right? Healed up as quickly as he could. So does Brock Bowers play in this one? We'll see. Georgia did play a couple games without him this year. They did not miss a beat. Ladd McConkey, guys, another big name for this Georgia football team, and he should be healthy. He should be good to go if Brock Bowers is not on the field. And we did not see the Brock Bowers that we expected to, the Ladd McConkey we expected to, because, again, Ladd was hurt most of the season. He is a big-time weapon and an X factor on the outside for Carson Beck. So you just wonder, again, McConkey was a guy who was banged up in that SEC title game. Is he going to be back to full strength? What is the status of him? And if Brock Bowers does not go, how much pressure is there on Ladd McConkey to step up and be that guy? Certainly supporting cast pieces around him, but he will be the feature guy on the outside, the go-to target, if you will. Now, guys, on the other side of things, for Florida State, you have to wonder where they are mentally, right? Because we talk about teams not being amped for bowl games or not being excited. If there's one team that you can really justify them being down in the dumps and not looking forward to playing their bowl game, if there's one team you can justify for that, it's the Florida State Seminoles. After the way they were left out of the college football playoff. Listen, I'm someone, guys, I understood why they got left out. They wouldn't have been in my Final Four either. But still, from a team standpoint, from a psyche standpoint, to go undefeated and to not get an opportunity to play for it all. And you're not Liberty. You're not Tulane. You're not some FCS school. This is Florida State. And you don't get an opportunity to play for it all after going 13-0. You just have to wonder where FSU is mentally. And I will say this, and others have made this point, but I want to echo it. Here's what I think the wrong approach in this game is. Because so many people, they're going to look at this Orange Bowl. Georgia's probably going to win this game, right? They were 2-touchdown favorite. If Georgia blows out Florida State, so many people are going to look at this game and say, see? That tells you right there, FSU didn't belong. Now, again, I'm someone that I wouldn't have put in my Final Four either, because I don't think Florida State was the same team without Jordan Travis. Florida State at their best was one of the 4 best teams in college football, but they're not at their best. They're not even remotely at their best without their starting quarterback. With that being said, though, so many people are going to point to this Orange Bowl if Georgia blows out Florida State and say, see, that's proof right there. FSU didn't belong. I think this is completely separate, guys, because this isn't going to be the best version of that Florida State team we watched all season taking the field, right? Opt-outs have hit FSU. Some of their top guys are out in this game. Former Gamecock Jaheim Bell has went ahead and declared for the NFL draft. It's just guy after guy after guy, because FSU had a goal of playing for the ultimate prize. They got a lot of guys in the portal, and them guys said, you know what? We ain't going there, so I'm out, deuces. And it is what it is. That's the new age of college football. I just don't think, though, you can look at this game and say, well, this game will be proof. This game will be validation one way or the other. Now, if you're FSU, you're playing with house money, right? You are. You're playing with house money, because if you go out there and beat Georgia, if Florida State, for whatever reason, goes out there and takes down Georgia, well, all of a sudden, they've got a real argument of, hey, we should have been in. We should have been in the college football playoff. That was a mistake. And you're probably going to have another team in the state of Florida proclaiming themselves as national champions, even though they did not win it all. So, a lot is at stake here. But where is Florida State mentally? That's my question. Where are they mentally? Because nobody would blame them if they were down and out. But what an opportunity it presents for the Seminoles in this one. Guys, it's the Noles defense that has really risen to the occasion. They're going to have to do so one more time. I cannot wait to watch that FSU front seven against that Georgia offensive line that has done such a good job at protecting Carson Beck, opening holes for the running game. They got the big uglies up front. Again, FSU guys in the ACC championship, I believe it was 7 sacks they generated against Louisville. They're going to go after the quarterback early and often. How does Georgia withstand that? How do they combat that? Finally, guys, Georgia is looking to do something they have not done in quite a long time. That is bounce back from a loss, right? Georgia losing to Alabama. First loss in 30 games for the Dogs. Had a 29-game winning streak and finally lost. So, how does Kirby rally the troops? How does Kirby get Georgia off the mat and ready to play and inspired and excited? Because what's interesting, it's like, who wants it more of two teams that barely won it at all, right? FSU feels like they got jobbed. Georgia had their sights set on 3 straight national titles, and they fell short of that goal. So it's like, of these two teams that would probably rather be anywhere else, who can be inspired, who can be fired up, who can get motivated to play in this football game? Which brings me into my prediction, guys. You know, I cannot wait for the 12-team playoff, guys. I'm a 12-team playoff guy. I like the idea of more teams having an opportunity. And I think most are now seeing, you know what, even if you don't like an expanded playoff, it's the lesser of the two evils in this scenario, right? Because the fact Florida State doesn't get to prove it on the field is a shame. It is. The fact they don't get to prove it on the field is a shame, right? And people talked about, well, the regular season's its own playoff. Well, not everybody's regular season schedule is equal. That's the problem with your argument. And then the people say that the games won't matter argument. To who? I call baloney on that. I call BS. I couldn't disagree more. That being said, it's a shame Florida State doesn't get an opportunity to play with their best 22 and find out what they could do with what they have, right? I'm just going to say that. Back to what I said, though, you got to think about where Florida State is mentally, man. You just have to question it. You have to question the motivation. You have to question the excitement to play in this game. And while I think Georgia, do I think they're thrilled? Not necessarily. But, and I think Mike Norvell's a really, really good coach. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a great coach. I think he's doing great things at Florida State. But if I got to pick one of these two coaches to motivate their football team, fire up their football team, get their football team ready to go in a game like this, I'm riding with Kirby Smart every single time because there's nobody better in college football at doing that and getting his team ready to go, having his team take it personally, right, than a Kirby Smart. And so I think he'll have the Dogs ready to go, guys. I do think that Georgia's defense will be suffocating. I think they'll key on the run. I think they'll dare Florida State to beat them through the air. And I just don't trust that Tate Rodemaker will be able to do that. I think Carson Beck, the return news was massive for Georgia. I think he'll play well in this football game. I do think the Dogs will roll, guys. I just think Florida State, again, you have to really question where they're at mentally. I don't think it's in a great place. And so, again, for that reason, I am taking the Georgia Bulldogs to get a big win over Florida State, guys. Lock me in. Give me UGA 34, FSU 13. Again, I don't trust where Florida State is mentally. I don't think they're fired up for this game. I don't think they're excited. And I think Georgia is just a better football team, top to bottom. Even if FSU was full strength, I'd probably be picking Georgia in this game. I think Georgia's going to punch Florida State in the mouth, and they're going to punch them again, and they're going to punch them again, and they're going to punch them again. And I don't doubt that FSU defensively or what have you, they'll probably have some jabs their own, but they're not going to have enough to withstand what Georgia is. And, just because the Dogs lost to Bama, they're still one of the best teams in college football. Make no mistake about it. I think they will show that. I think they will flex their muscles. I think Kirby Smart will have the Dogs ready to go as they get a big win in the Orange Bowl. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we'll take some of your questions, your comments, and then we'll get into our conversation. Our good friend Colin Anthony of the Mizzodcast will join the show to talk all things Missouri football, our 2023 season review. for the Tigers. Guys, all that and more on the other side. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle doggy ho. Muscle doggy ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Tuesday, December the 19th, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Again, upcoming guys in about 10 minutes or so, our good friend Colin Anthony of the Mizzodcast. We're going to talk all things Missouri football in 2023. Look ahead to next week's Cotton Bowl as well as Mizzou takes on Ohio State. In the meantime, guys, next 10 minutes or so, we will take your questions, comments, what have you. And let me just say this, guys. I'm seeing a lot of griping, a lot of complaining, and I understand it completely about the sheer amount of SEC content that we are producing and the content, the subject matter that we are discussing. Let me just say this. It will all make sense very, very, very soon. With that being said, too, I mean, what would you guys, if we were just solely going to talk about 90%, 95% Gamecock today, I mean, in a 2-hour show, solo dolo, what is there to discuss, really? Do y'all want to talk about the basketball game against Winthrop tonight? Do y'all want to talk about anyways, that's sort of beside the point. Anyways, I understand completely, guys. This has been a Gamecock show for the longest time, and things may not make sense currently. We've been talking a lot of SEC. I'm somebody, for me, it's very natural, right? We've been leaning into these bowl games, and there's no bowl game for South Carolina. Basketball season's not really up and running at full steam. It's just one of those things, guys. You have to trust me when I say it'll all make sense very, very, very soon. And I do apologize to you all as viewers. I'm sorry if we have not met your expectations for what the show is and or should be. But again, I'm making the content that I want to make. I'm talking about the subject matter that I want to talk about, and it'll all make sense soon. And I'll leave it at that. So, anyways, 843-790-3377, guys, taking your questions, your comments, your voicemails. Again, guys, all of this will make sense very soon. I'll just leave it at that. We will have big announcements upcoming over the next week or two. Again, things will start to make a lot more sense. And I'll just leave it at that. So, anyways, going back to your questions. Again, I thought a great conversation with J.C. Sherbert, guys. I see a lot of you commenting on the recruiting class and who they're going to sign at the quarterback position. And offensive line was a question I was really, really happy to ask J.C. about. They think they've got the solutions on the roster. They feel like they've got the solution on the roster. And, I think that's interesting. Obviously, there were a lot of injuries. There was a lot of youth, as JC pointed out. So, anyways, guys, again, I got a little off topic, if you will, with some of the comments I saw. Again, our guy Jeff Gullidge, Travis Allen, even Coach Ford getting in on the action. John Eber says the basketball team does deserve more love. For the bigger games, John Edward, we have talked about South Carolina men's basketball. It's just, unfortunately, John Edward, that basketball just does not move the needle right now. For me, I really don't even start watching basketball or get excited about basketball until New Year's. That's for when we get into SEC play. So, but yes, South Carolina men's basketball, great win over Charleston Southern. The Winthrop game, obviously upcoming. So, let's see. Firevol, what's up, man? Appreciate tuning in. Yeah, again, guys, I'm not going to say a lot right now. I will just say stay tuned in the coming days, and things will make more sense. So, I'll have more to share with you all by Friday. I'll put it to you that way. So, I'll have more to share with you all by Friday. And, yeah, I promise you, and I've said this many times. Guys. When I do things and make decisions, I do obviously think about the audience, and I definitely understand, Jeff. It's not personal. Nothing's personal. I take none of it personally. I definitely understand that it's a very weird vibe, admittedly, to see the Spurs Up show talking about Ole Miss football, Georgia football, Missouri football, anybody else talking about any other team outside of South Carolina. I know that's different. That's not what some of you may expect. So again, I'm going to leave it at that, guys. We could go off the deep end right now if we really wanted to, but I don't want to. So in the coming days, coming weeks, things will make much, much more sense. And, I appreciate the honest, genuine feedback. I really do value it. I value each of you guys that tunes into this show, especially many of you who tune in on a daily basis and who have been doing so since 2020, right, when this show was noon to 1 p.m. Eastern. I can't say thank you enough for you guys showing love and support. I mean, literally tuning in. I can name the names off the top of my head, people that tune in on a daily basis. So, anyways, Coach Ford, I like discussing other teams some. God knows Shane is not giving much content. Just 50-50. We seem to be leaning 80% others. Welcome hearing other teams, especially the new ones, talking about what to do and see in the towns and campuses. Yeah, definitely Coach Ford will do like a taste the town taste the town. We'll do with Texas and OU especially, give Gamecock fans an idea where to go, what to see, what to do, all that good stuff. Bruce, any more on the coaching changes? I've heard nothing new, Bruce. I've heard nothing new at all. I do think if Shane Beamer and company are going to make moves, it's going to be after the new year. I mean, I think that goes without saying. Obviously, signing day is tomorrow. I certainly don't think you're making a change today or tomorrow or this week, God forbid. So I think if there are any changes, I think it'll happen after the first of the year, but just have to wait and see. I mean, who knows? Who knows, honestly, man? Who knows? Again, we are awaiting Colin Anthony of the Mizzodcast. And guys, I'll say this one last thing. Again, I promise not to keep you guys in the dark. I promise to let you all know what's going on. I love you. I appreciate your support. You mean the absolute world to me. I would never do anything to take away value from our end consumer. That is quite the opposite of all the decisions I make are about increasing value and doing things that only make the experience better for our audience. So again, I appreciate you guys, your love, your understanding, and y'all tuning into the show on a day in, day out basis. So let's see. Anyways, guys, I would not expect, like I mentioned, coaching changes till after the first of the year. That is something where if they do happen, it is going to be after the first of the year. So again, with that being said, and by the way, in case you missed the big news yesterday, guys, Dylan Raiola commits to Nebraska. He went from committing to Ohio State, flipping to Georgia, then flipping to Nebraska. So a crazy deal for the recruitment of one of the top quarterbacks in the country in the 2024 class. Guys, with that being said, we're going to bring him in here in just a second, a man whose team had a fantastic year, the Missouri Tigers. And it's so funny. I remember the conversation so vividly, right? We were talking over the summer and so many Gamecock fans giving their feedback on what Missouri was or wasn't or what they were going to be. And I think there were very, very conservative expectations. Let's call it for what it is, right? Mizzou getting picked to finish sixth in the SEC East. And nobody, maybe outside of some of those in Como, expect what we got this year, a 10-2 finish and a Cotton Bowl appearance against the Ohio State Buckeyes. Again, guys, we had him on back over the summer. We're happy to bring him on yet again, our good friend, Colin Anthony of the Mizzodcast. He joins the show. Colin, what's going on, man? Appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, what's up? How are you guys?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I appreciate you asking. So let's get right into it, man. I again, my mind goes back to the conversation that we had over the summer where we're talking about this Missouri football team, the prospects of it, the quarterback situation, which we'll get into in just a second. Take me through it, though. How surprised, if at all, were you watching Missouri this year and then the dust settles 10-2, 6-2 in conference? How surprised, how impressed were you with the job that Eli Drinkwitz did this season?
Very impressed. I think if you are a listener to our show, you know that me and my co-host were not high on Brady Cook. I called Cody Schrader a placeholder. You know what I mean? Like he was a fine little running back, but I didn't look at him as somebody who was going to be an All-American, and was happy to eat crow. It became very apparent as the season went on that Cody Schrader and the offensive line were more than just, okay. They were good. They were really good. And they were, and they showed it against in games like Tennessee where they just ran over people. And Brady Cook plays efficiently. He got the ball down the field. He threw with accuracy. He's got that all-important element for a college quarterback, in my opinion. He's got legs. He can run for a first down. He can scramble around. They're a dynamic team on offense, and a lot of that credit goes to Kirby Moore, because Drinkwitz certainly didn't have them looking like this before he had an offensive coordinator. But they just continue to get better. The defense, I think, really turned a corner after the LSU game. Missouri was in that game most of the way, and I think they really got burned by sort of dropping into soft zones and sort of trying to keep things in front of them. And that had been one page in the D book, and the other page had been just, putting your corners on an island and bringing the heat. And I didn't see a lot of soft zones after that LSU game, because I think they went back and looked at the tape and said, you know what, we gave Jaden Daniels too many opportunities. He's too good a quarterback to just sort of let him sit back there and try to pick apart a zone. And after that, they never looked back. It was pressure all the time. They had really, Rakestraw and Ennis are as good a pair of cornerbacks as you're going to have. And so they had the talent to do that. They had the ability to kind of let those D-backs sit on an island, and they could really bring pressure. They could bring linebackers. And the D-line just in general, without, blitz pressure, played really well. So the defense played well, which we expected to. It didn't really, in the season, we were a little bit concerned we had overestimated what they were going to be. But as the season moved on, they proved to be pretty stout. And then the offense was just a tremendous, pleasant surprise. I mean, you go onto Twitter and people are telling you how they'd wreck your team. And I'm just like, man, anybody that's seeing this, has watched this Mizzou football team, does not be like, we would wreck this team. I remember Louisville giving us a lot of grief when Mizzou and Louisville were kind of fighting for that January 6th bid. And I'm like, man, I've watched Louisville and I've watched Missouri, and I'm going to tell you what, Cody Schrader and this offensive line would absolutely pummel you. You do not want this. You do not want the smoke. But luckily they lost, so I don't have to listen to their lip anymore. There's still a little lip coming out of Ole Miss and places like that, but OU is a little bit salty. They become a feeder school for Missouri. I don't know if you've heard, but anyway, so that's got them a little upset. But it was a great season. I mean, it's a season we'll remember, and I know we've talked about on our show. We hope that it represents a permanent change of residence for Mizzou. I know that your listeners got upset when I referred to Missouri and South Carolina and Kentucky and these teams as middling. We're just sort of living in this middle of the pack, SEC East, and where you don't want to stay there. You're always wanting to break out. And this season was a breakout season for Mizzou. And now the test is, can Drinkwitz sustain it? Is this just one of those breakout years, those sort of anomalies that we all love, or is this something that we can sustain on a consistent level?
Now, Colin, you mentioned Cody Schrader, the offensive line. I want to talk about the quarterback position, though, Brady Cook, because, I mean, I remember, again, vividly, you and I talking about Sam Horn over the summer, and should he be the starter? Will he win the starting job? Brady Cook, over 3,000 yards passing, 20 touchdowns, 5 picks. Where do you feel like he took the greatest steps forward, and where did he make the greatest strides to turn into the player that he became this season?
For me, accuracy. I mean, I saw him deliver balls into windows, which was, when you really break down the college game, a lot of times the wide receivers making these catches are wide open, high school wide open a lot of times. And Brady Cook threw with an accuracy that I didn't know that he had. And I think a lot of his success comes down to, a very successful run game, and then an offense that was just a lot more open than it had been in the past. I mean, it's hard to put up gaudy statistics when you're running bubble screens and, wide receiver screens. And, there wasn't much there in the offense, and it opened up, and he had a lot more arm strength than I gave him credit for. He got the ball down the field. He threw with accuracy. I think that was his biggest step forward, and just plain old confidence. I mean, I saw a guy out there who, while, myself and many of the fan base may have doubted him, he never seemed to doubt himself. He walked out there, sort of had, what are you going to call it, swagger or confidence, whatever. But he seemed to believe he had what it took to lead this team, and he obviously did.
Now, Colin, as you look at the season, was there a moment for you where you knew it was going to be a special year for Mizzou? And I think back to the Kansas State game. I think that was a really good sign. Obviously, what was it, the 61-yarder, I think, to win that football game. The LSU game was a close loss, so I don't know that in an L you're really looking at it as, okay, this is going to be a 10-win football team. I mean, you had the big win at Kentucky, middle of October, trounced South Carolina at home. Was there a moment for you specifically where you thought to yourself, okay, this team is way better than me or anyone else around me thought they were going to be?
Yeah, I'd say that moment for me came at Kentucky. They lost to LSU, but honestly, when they lost to LSU, I wasn't convinced that LSU was that good. I knew they were a good football team, but I was like, I was a little on the fence with LSU. But we got down fast, 14 points to Kentucky, and that's something that would have derailed this team in other seasons. That would have just been we would have not recovered from that, and we got a touchdown on a fake punt, and then we marched down the field and then scored again, and we just never looked back. I mean, Kentucky didn't have an answer. We just dominated the line of scrimmage and just kind of pummeled them. And then we rolled into South Carolina, we pummeled them, and then we pummeled Tennessee. But Kentucky was the moment where I just watched our team be dominant on a level that, Kentucky just was not in our weight class. And so I thought something special is going on here. And then we roll it into South Carolina, and it was just like, wow, these teams are, again, unfortunately a little bit middling, and Mizzou is not middling right now. They are taking these teams to the woodshed, and it was sure enjoyable as a fan to watch.
Colin, what gives you confidence moving forward that, you talked about now the challenge is how do you follow it up, right? You're only as good as your last game, your last season, whatever. What gives you confidence that moving forward into the new SEC, the expansion, adding Texas and OU, a 12-team college football playoff, right? Missouri would have been in. What gives you supreme confidence that this won't be a one-off season and that Eli Drinkwitz is building something where winning 9 or 10 games, if not more, a season is something that will happen on a more consistent basis?
I don't know that I believe it yet. The next year certainly looks good. Because we're going to have Cook back. We're going to have Norfleet, who was a freshman this year, as a tight end, and looks like he might be, all SEC kind of caliber player. There's just a lot of talent coming back. We're losing some stuff on defense, but the recruiting continues to be good, which I think is what sustains you in that, change of residence. What Caden Green just transferred from OU. He's got 3 years of eligibility. We just picked up that Crutchfield kid who's a wide receiver, 4-star out of Arkansas. We should mention we have the number 1 recruit out of Arkansas for football and basketball right now. So we're enjoying that. But, who wants to go to, a school like Arkansas, frankly? But anyway, it's recruiting. It's recruiting. I've said it on our show 100 times. I want a coach to be great at the X's and O's. It's great. I love him to be good at the podium, but the top 3 criteria that a coach has to check in the boxes I'm concerned about is recruiting. And if you don't have talent, you can't win ball games. It's about the Jimmies and Joes, not the X's and O's a lot of times. I don't like that phrase really because it discounts the X and O's a little too much for me. But the point is like when you have Luther Burden, when you have Cook, when you have Schrader, you see what happens. You got 10-win seasons. You're playing on January 1st. People are talking about a resurgence for your program. And so if we're going to sustain this, and I hope that we do, it's going to be through recruiting. And so far, Drinkwitz looks like he's keeping that train on the tracks.
Now, Colin, speaking of that bowl game against Ohio State upcoming, obviously a massive opportunity, and maybe 2 programs that are looking at this game a little bit differently, right? We have to talk about motivation factor when we talk about bowl games. And I like Mizzou in this game because I think on the Ohio State side, right, their quarterback is opted out. They've got opt-outs in their football team. Ohio State's Ohio State, and their goal was to get to the playoff and win a national title. And by the way, they're playing a really, really good Missouri team, but so they're combating all of that on-field, off-field. Missouri, on the other hand, what a win over Ohio State would do, get an 11th win, put that exclamation point on this season, and really launch into 2024 and set up what I think most Tiger fans hope is a run at the college ball playoff. Your overall outlook on this game, your feeling going in this game, I mean, again, Missouri, it sounds like, is at full force. The portal hasn't really affected them all that much, if at all. And it sounds like to me, Colin, that Eli Drinkwitz's team is definitely set up for success in this one. And I'm picking Mizzou to win the football game. So your overall feeling on the matchup and the game itself?
Well, I mean, I think Mizzou should win the game just from a motivational standpoint. Ohio State's, they're a lot of players aren't playing. We get it. But in Mizzou, like I said, we've been a middling program. We've sort of lived in that sort of wash in the middle. And so when a team like Mizzou gets to come up and get an opportunity to take a shot at the blue blood, I think that's a lot of motivation. It's certainly a lot of motivation for me if I was playing. Like, who doesn't want to club Ohio State? The other matchup I was looking at was Penn State. Man, I'd love to club Penn State. And I think it would have been a good game if Ohio State would have brought their whole roster. I think they're going to run into the same thing with Mizzou that the SEC did, and they're going to maybe overlook this team a little bit, talk about, oh, it's just Mizzou, and then they're going to run into Cody Schrader in this offensive line and let the clubbing begin. So, I mean, at least that's what I'm hoping. There's even, Cody Schrader put up 112 yards against Georgia, and probably should have had more if we committed to more of the run. LSU couldn't handle Cody Schrader. I mean, these are, blue bloods as well, and so I don't know why, we should be intimidated by Ohio State, especially when their roster has been depleted. So we're looking forward to it. And I think Mizzou fans, like I said, I get it. Listen, I'm a realist as a fan. I understand that Ohio State has a great big history, a much bigger history than Mizzou. And so their fans live in a different neighborhood, the neighborhood we would like to move into, where if we're not going to the playoff, do we really care? But Mizzou does care. You're a blue blood, and we want to, crush you. We want to pop your head like a zit, and that's what we're looking to do. And I think that's the sentiment that is in the locker room right now.
Colin, you mentioned recruiting. Of course, the portal has kind of taken some of the flavor out of National Signing Day, if you will, which is tomorrow. But recruiting is the lifeblood of any great program, as well as the portal, adding talent into your program. Bottom line, how do you feel about it right now? Missouri sits 13th in the SEC in recruiting. This is obviously factoring in as well Texas and Oklahoma. So 13th out of 16 teams. Colin, you know as well as I do what's interesting, though, is you can have the 13th best class in the SEC and be ranked 19th nationally, right? So it's kind of like ignore the national rankings, look at the SEC rankings more so. But again, Mizzou 13th right now, just picked up, like you mentioned, the big offensive line from Oklahoma in the portal. They've gotten some difference makers in the portal. You talked about it, so I'll ask you your overall feelings right now on recruiting, the portal, and overall just talent acquisition for Eli Drinkwitz.
I'm sort of unworried. I mean, we lost out on some stuff yesterday that I think we thought we might get, but we're recruiting at a level that we haven't before, and we're shopping in aisles we couldn't afford to shop in before. And so I think our presence on that stage, that 4- and 5-star player stage is an improvement. And we have consistently brought in talent. Like, so we got a couple guys, we haven't got as much as we'd like, but I don't know. I think as a Mizzou fan, we're conditioned not to be too hung up on the ranking systems, because when we have good teams, they're usually built of 3 stars. The vast majority is developmental talent. We brought them into 3 stars. Maybe they were undersized coming out of school, or they were raw and needed some coaching up. But, when you're a program like Mizzou, that's sort of where the neighborhood you live in when it comes to recruiting. And Drinkwitz is sort of, burgeoning on busting through that ceiling of not sort of your roster not being completely comprised of 3 stars and then a sprinkling a few 4 and 5s here. And I think on the whole over the next few years we've already seen it. Mizzou's going to have more and more stars in their roster. But like I said, it's a year in year out deal. I think Mizzou has a lot of heat right now. I think everything's coming up Mizzou football. I think Drinkwitz is winning awards. We're 10-win season. I think it's a good look to be stealing players from OU and Arkansas. It's they're rivals, at least geographically, whether they would want to admit that or not. So that's always nice. God, our Twitter has just been correct. I mean, it has just been a cesspool of Arkansas and Oklahoma and Mizzou just yelling and screaming at each other. I don't really get involved in it. It's just like, I can't believe we're doing. You guys how much time do you have on your hands? But it is a guilty pleasure to go in there and just watch OU fans get clubbed. I will say that.
Admittedly, I was going to say, Colin, we have our good friend John Neighbors on the show from time to time. It's always fun to watch you guys go back and forth with John, with his you know, with the way that his SEC Media Days comments went somewhat mini viral or viral, whatever,
Yeah.
I'm really happy that I was able to keep the level-headed SEC Media Days when I actually gave Missouri a lot of credit and just said that, hey, if you lose every year, it's not how football works. You can't proclaim you're the dominant program if you have a 4 or 5 game losing streak. And John took the other approach, and Missouri took Arkansas to the woodshed. So it's been fun watching y'all go back and forth.
Well, I think it's, Missouri has always, before we were in the SEC, we lived in the Big 12, and we dealt with the Oklahomas and the Texases of the world. And, now we're in the SEC and we deal with other storied programs. The difference that I find in the SEC from our Big 12 days is that while Georgia and Alabama rightly hold high opinions of themselves, there's so many teams in this conference that have no history of success, especially sustained success, who will just look down on you and be like, oh my, you plebs. And it's like, what are you talking about, Ole Miss? Who are you? What universe have you lived in? Arkansas may be the worst of the bunch. It's just a bunch of John Neighborses. I don't know what seasons they have watched. I don't remember any of these seasons. Like, I don't know. It's delusional. It's straight up delusional. I know who Mizzou is. Mizzou's a middling program who jumps up and bites people in the butt once in a while. That's what we are. I hope we become more than that, but that's what we are. And I feel like most of the Mizzou fans I talk to sort of share that reality. But ever since we come to the SEC, I mean, like, Peyton Manning's been retired for 10 years, Tennessee. Like, I don't know. I mean, there's kids in college watching this football team get just bludgeoned by Mizzou who don't remember who Peyton Manning is. Like, it's been a while. Let's come back to reality a little bit.
Colin says, bring back self-awareness for a lot of these.
That's right.
Let's make self-awareness great again, he says. Colin, before we get you out here, let's look ahead to 2024. The slate is officially out. I got to say it sets up pretty well for the Tigers, man. I mean, obviously you mentioned who they're going to bring back. It's led by Brady Cook, but the schedule starts out Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, Vandy. Those are the first 4 games, and then you get a bye week. Mizzou should be 4-0. Is that too much? Then you got Texas A&M in College Station, but with a first-year coach. UMass.
That's a Faroe South, though. You don't got to worry about that.
Fair enough. Faroe South. A&M in College Station. Am I reading this correctly that UMass is in UMass, Amherst? Is it up there? Is that right?
I haven't actually looked at the schedule that closely.
It says UMass. I think it is at their place, which would be a very interesting non-con game. Either way, though, Auburn and Como, Alabama and Tuscaloosa is a tough one. Bye week. Yeah. You got Oklahoma and Como, which is going to be a blast. Obviously, like you mentioned, throwback to the Big 12 days. South Carolina in the other Columbia, Mississippi State and Starkville, and then Arkansas and Como. Your overall feelings on the 2024 schedule and just how it shakes out or how it sets up for Missouri. I mean, I think with a 12-team college football playoff incoming and with the pieces you'll have returning, the pieces you're adding through recruiting in the portal, I'd have to imagine the building off 2023 is it's college football playoff or bust in 2024, right? I mean, is that asking too much or is that fair?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I certainly think it's the expectation the fan base is going to carry. Considering what's coming back, like you said, the schedule seems to set up well, but nobody would have picked Mizzou to have the season it did before this started, and there's inevitably going to be somebody on that schedule for next year that is going to be having that same sort of season. Maybe you'll get lucky at South Carolina, but there's going to be somebody that you look at on that schedule that, as we look at it now, doesn't sound like a big game that will end up being one. But I think it's realistic to expect another 10-win season. Now, whether that gets you to the playoffs, it will depend on who comprises that 10 wins. But I think that Mizzou certainly is as good a chance as they're going to have in a while, probably. They're going to be coming in. It's the first year. They have a great team. There's just such an ebb and flow to college football and the recruiting. You just never know when you're going to get these opportunities. And I hope that the coaches can impart to these kids what an opportunity this is. Like, we're a team that can get to the playoff system. And once you're in the playoffs, who knows? It's been far too long to get to this 12-man playoff. I've been frustrated since I read the book, The Death to the BCS, all those years ago. And I was like, I can't believe they can't figure this out. The NFL's been doing this for years. It's called, it's playoffs. It's fine. It's easy. Somebody's already figured it out. That's the same with the NIL money. But like, what are we going to do about this money? The NCAA is proposing these ridiculous plans. It's like, Have you heard of the salary cap? It's this thing that the professional sports teams have. You could have one, conceivably, and then sort of level the playing field. But college football doesn't work that way. There's a bunch of old white guys in a room, I assume, chewing on cigars, being like, we can't do that. We got to play at the Rose Bowl. I don't know. But it's college football, I think, is finally moving into what it truly is, a professional sport. The players getting paid. There's a playoff system. There's free agency, which we call the portal, but it's free agency. And when any sports entity makes as much money as college football does, it ceases to be anything but a professional sport.
Colin Anthony of the Mizzodcast. Colin, it's always a pleasure, man. Congratulations to you and Mizzou on a fantastic season. Best of luck against Ohio State, and look forward to chatting with you more in 2024, my man. It's always great stuff.
Yep, have a good one.
Yeah, man, appreciate you. We'll talk soon. Great stuff, guys. Colin Anthony of the Mizzodcast. We are going to jump into one final break on the other side. We'll close out the show in style here on this Tuesday. All that and more, guys. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie, ho. Muscle Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back. Final couple minutes or so here on this Tuesday. I want to say thank you again to Colin Anthony of the Mizzodcast, taking the time to chat. Really good stuff. Great to hear updates on Missouri and get geared up for next week's game as they take on the Ohio State Buckeyes. We got a text here. Texter says, merch idea for next year, quote, respect the specs. Respect the specs. Love that. Love that. Let's see. Coach Ford says wide receivers just like offensive line. No one will be hearing excuses next season for O-line issues or wide receiver issues. Beamer has been resistant to changes there. I think the staff situation is one where he's using this freebie year, then throw us a bone by firing a few assistants that had nothing to do with it. If they drag butt again next year, buying himself some time on the backs of his scapegoats. That via Coach Ford. John Edwards says, Tennessee fans are terrible, especially grasping at alleged sign stealing, saying that's the only reason we won. Firevol probably listens to Mark Ryan too much. John Edwards, how often do you listen to Mark Ryan, honestly? I feel like you tune in almost every day. Billy Cotton says the state of South Carolina owns Ohio State. Lucas Green, any other quarterbacks being mentioned as a potential pickup in the portal for South Carolina? Actually, yes. Sports Talk just posted this just a moment ago. Southern Cal transfer quarterback Malachi Nelson tells them that he has interest in the Gamecocks, says he's impressed by what South Carolina's done developing quarterbacks. So, Malachi Nelson, could that happen? By the way, guys, side note, London Humphreys, Vanderbilt wide receiver, is transferring to Georgia. He committed today, 6'3", 195, 3 years of eligibility left, had 22 catches for 439 yards and 4 touchdowns in 2023. So, the transfer portal stuff is continuing to play out. And guys, let me just mention one more time in closing to all of you. Thank you all so much for your continued love and support. So many of you have been here from the jump since, heck, some of you since we were Armchair South Carolina. Many of you have been here since the very beginning of the Daily Crow. And guys, there are things on the horizon in regards to our future and our evolution. And I cannot wait to share those with you. And I'll leave it at that. Guys, again, thank you all so much for tuning in. If you're on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that bell icon so you get notifications of when we go live and we drop new video content as well. Also, guys, subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. You can check us out at the Spurs Up Show there. Outside of that, guys, be sure to follow us on social media. Stay tuned to all the content bleeding out of the eyeballs, certainly as we get closer and get into National Signing Day tomorrow. Also, guys, we'll continue along with the bowl game simulations today at 4 o'clock. We're actually simming the Missouri and Ohio State game as we simulate all of those bowl games. Really exciting stuff. Guys, in the meantime, thank you all so much. Appreciate you all tuning in. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.